Welcome to another deep dive.
Oh, this is going to be a good one.
Today, we're opening up Malcolm Gladwell's The Tipping Point
Yes, such a good book.
to really understand how things become popular so fast, you know?
Like how trends just explode. It's
Right.
like overnight, they're everywhere.
Yeah, have you ever wondered about that?
Definitely.
It can be so weird.
Well, it often doesn't seem logical at all. You know?
Oh, exactly.
Gladwell actually starts off
Oh, yeah.
by talking about crime in New York City.
Really?
Like in the 90s, crime just plummeted,
Wow, that's crazy to think about.
and no one really saw it coming. It was so sudden.
So how does he explain something like that?
Well, Gladwell breaks it down into three main ideas.
Makes sense.
He calls them the law of the few, the stickiness factor, and the power of context.
Okay, so the law of the few, stickiness factor, and power of context.
Got it. And they all basically revolve around how seemingly tiny things can have a massive impact.
I love that. I'm all about the small things making a big difference. Okay, let's start with the law of the few. What's that all about?
So Gladwell says that certain types of people are just crucial. Crucial.
That's really important.
Yeah, when it comes to spreading information.
Okay.
And he gives them like these special names:
Let me guess.
connectors, mavens, and salesmen.
Yeah, that sounds right.
And honestly, it's a pretty perfect way to describe them.
Well, let's break those down a bit.
Sure.
So tell me about these connectors.
Okay, so think of Paul Revere.
Wait, the one if by land, two if by sea guy.
Exactly.
Didn't realize he was a trendsetter.
Well, think about his midnight ride, right?
Oh, yeah, the British are coming.
He wasn't the only writer trying to spread the word, by the way.
Really?
Yeah, there's this other guy, William Dawes.
Okay.
Same message, but his ride, well, it didn't really go anywhere.
That's so interesting.
But Revere, he was a total connector, you know?
Okay.
He knew everyone, everyone.
Oh, so like he had a huge network.
Huge. And that's what let him spread the message so effectively.
Makes
And today, we still have connectors all around us.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, you can probably think of someone right now.
I can, yeah.
The person who knows about everything before everyone else.
Right, or who can connect you with anyone you need.
Exactly. That's a connector.
Okay, what about the mavens?
All right, so mavens are kind of like the information gurus, right?
The specialists.
Yeah.
Always doing the research.
They always know the best deals. They've read every single review.
Oh, I know a maven for sure.
And they're not trying to sell you anything.
No.
They just genuinely want to help.
Like they love sharing what they know.
Exactly.
Okay.
Gladwell actually uses this guy, Mark Alpert, as an example.
Who that?
He's an econ professor, super smart.
Mm-hmm.
Spends hours and hours
Oh, no.
finding the best deals on everything.
Wow.
From TVs to cars, you name it.
That's amazing.
And he just loves telling people about him.
That's dedication.
Total maven.
All right, so we've got connectors and mavens.
Now we need some salesmen.
The close.
Right, so what's their deal?
They are masters of persuasion.
Like, they can convince you of anything.
Pretty much, they've got this charisma, this energy.
Right.
Gladwell actually spends time to this financial advisor, Tom Gow, who's just incredible.
Oh, wow.
He uses all these like subtle cues.
What do you mean?
Things like, oh, a smile at just the right moment.
Oh,
Or nodding when you're talking.
subtle stuff.
It's wild how much it can influence us, even subconsciously.
I never think about stuff like that.
Most people don't.
Makes you wonder how much we're really in control of our decisions.
Right. And Gladwell's point is that we underestimate the impact of these subtle cues.
Okay, so we've got our connectors, mavens, and salesmen.
The law of the few.
But how do they actually create a tipping point?
Good question.
Gladwell uses the example of hush puppies, right?
Yeah, the shoes.
I remember those.
Like in the early 90s, they were so out of style.
Yeah, they were.
But then all of a sudden, boom, everyone's wearing them. It's like they came out of nowhere.
Well, not exactly.
What do you mean?
Gladwell argues it was the law of the few at work.
Explain it to me.
Think about it. Connectors started wearing them.
Okay.
Then the mavens are like, hey, these are cool, a new trend.
Right.
And the salesmen, maybe without even realizing it, they make them even more desirable.
Just by how they talk about them, maybe?
Exactly.
So it wasn't just the shoes themselves, it was the right people pushing them forward.
That's the magic of it, the law of the few.
It makes sense.
And Gladwell believes this applies to way more than just products and trends.
Like what?
Ideas, behaviors, even things like the drop in crime we talked about.
Oh, interesting.
He actually uses that crime drop to explain his next principle, the power of context.
Okay, let's hear it.
So he argues that our surroundings, our environment, can really influence our actions.
That makes sense.
And it's often in ways we don't even realize.
Okay.
He uses the example of the broken windows theory.
What's that?
The idea is that, like, small things, seemingly insignificant, things like graffiti or people jumping subway turnstiles,
Okay.
they actually create this atmosphere that can encourage more serious crime.
It's like setting a tone.
Exactly.
So if the environment says it's okay to break small rules,
People are more likely to break bigger ones.
that's interesting.
Think about the Bernie Goetz subway shooting back in '84.
I vaguely remember that.
It happened on a subway car that was, well,
What?
a mess, covered in graffiti, full of panhandlers.
Yeah.
It was like a symbol of everything wrong with the city at the time.
Wow.
And Gladwell argues that this environment, this sense of lawlessness,
Right.
may have played a role in what happened.
It's fascinating how the cities focus on fixing those broken windows.
You mean cleaning up the graffiti, cracking down on fare evasion?
Yeah.
It's amazing how much of an impact that had.
On lowering crime.
Exactly. It's all about context.
So it changes how we think about criminals, too. Well, we often see them as totally different from us, right?
Yeah.
But Gladwell's saying that maybe context matters more than we realize.
A lot more.
It's like anyone could end up in a situation where they do something they wouldn't normally do.
Exactly. Context is powerful.
Makes you think, doesn't it?
It definitely does.
Yes.
It really does.
It's almost like the saying,
We-
you are the company you keep.
Oh, yeah. Totally.
Our surroundings really shape us.
No doubt. And Gladwell brings up
Yeah.
a couple of really cool studies
Okay.
that back this up.
Oh, I love a good study.
First, there's the Stanford prison experiment.
I've heard of that.
Remember, totally normal college students
Yeah.
assigned as guards in a fake prison,
Right.
and they turned brutal, like so quickly.
Wow. It's scary how much the situation can change people.
It really is.
What was the other study?
The Hartshorn and May honesty studies.
Never heard of that one.
So they looked at whether kids would cheat or not.
Okay.
And it turned out that it wasn't really about their personality.
It wasn't?
Nope. It totally depended on the situation they were in.
So, like, if their friends were cheating, they'd cheat too.
Kind of. It was more about the overall environment.
That's fascinating.
It is. It means that instead of always blaming people's character,
Right.
we should think about the context, the situation they're in.
It's like giving people the benefit of the doubt.
Anyway, yeah.
Okay, so what else did Gladwell talk about?
Well, he goes into this thing called the fundamental attribution error.
The what?
Fundamental attribution error. It's a mouthful.
It is.
But it's basically about how we judge people.
Okay.
Have you ever, like, seen someone doing something
Yeah.
and instantly thought, oh, they're a jerk?
All the time.
Right. But we often don't know the whole story.
Like, maybe they have a good reason for acting that way. Exactly.
I'm definitely guilty of this.
We all are. It's human nature.
So this fundamental attribution error.
It's our tendency to, like, overemphasize someone's personality
Okay.
and underestimate the situation they're in. So we focus on who they are, not what's happening around them.
Right. It's like we forget to consider the bigger picture.
And Gladwell has an example for this, right?
He does, the classic Good Samaritan experiment.
Okay, remind me.
So they took a bunch of seminary students.
Like, people studying to be religious leaders.
Yep. And they had them think about a parable about helping others.
Okay.
Then they sent them off to another building.
All right.
But along the way, they planted an actor pretending to be in distress.
Oh, interesting.
And some students were told they were late. Others were given plenty of time.
I bet the late ones didn't stop.
You got it. Even though they were just thinking about compassion.
Wow.
Their context, being in a rush, completely trumped their intentions.
It's kind of sad, but also really interesting.
It is. It shows we're all susceptible to these biases.
Even when we think we're being totally objective.
Totally.
Okay, so we've covered the law of the few and the power of context,
On to the stickiness factor.
which is
All about how information is presented.
like why some messages grab you.
And others just, like, disappear.
Yes, exactly. I've always wondered about that.
Me too. Gladwell talks about this
Yeah.
tetanus shot campaign.
Mhm.
They wanted students to get vaccinated,
Right.
but just giving them pamphlets didn't really work.
Makes sense. No one reads pamphlets.
They do if they're interesting.
True.
So they added a map showing where to get the shots
Okay,
and a schedule of when they were available.
that's it.
Yeah, and it made a huge difference.
Really?
Huge. Way more students got vaccinated.
Just by adding a map and a schedule?
It's all about making the information relevant, you know?
So it connected to their lives.
Exactly.
That's a good lesson for anyone trying to get a message across.
Totally.
All right, so what other examples of stickiness does Gladwell give?
He spent some time talking about kids' TV,
Oh, interesting.
like Sesame Street and Blue's Clues.
I loved those shows.
They're classics.
But how do they relate to stickiness?
Well, both shows are incredibly well researched. Oh yeah, they put a lot of effort into making sure the content sticks.
Fascinating.
Like Sesame Street, they used to use this thing called the distractor.
The distractor.
Yeah, basically they'd show kids an episode,
Okay.
but they'd also have all these toys in the room.
To distract them.
Exactly.
Clever.
And they'd watch to see what kept the kids' attention.
So what did they learn?
The kids aren't just passively watching.
You're not.
Nope, they're actively engaged.
So if they don't understand something,
They look away,
makes sense.
but if it's engaging.
Stay glued.
Exactly.
What about Blue's Clues? How is it sticky?
Well, it's totally different from Sesame Street.
How so?
Sesame Street is fast-paced, lots of different segments.
Right.
Blue's Clues is much slower, calmer.
Yeah, and there's just one story per episode.
Right. But they use a lot of repetition.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
But it's not annoying. It actually builds confidence in kids.
Wow.
They ask the same questions over and over,
Yeah.
and the kids get to shout out the answers.
It's like they're part of the show.
Exactly.
And they learn by repetition without even realizing it.
It's brilliant.
Okay, so we've covered all three principles now.
We have.
The law of the few, the power of context, and the stickiness factor.
We're ready to see how they work together.
Definitely.
Let's look at the book Divine Secrets of the Yaya Sisterhood.
I remember that book. Everyone was reading it.
It was a total word-of-mouth phenomenon.
A classic tipping point.
Exactly.
So how did it happen?
Well, the author, Rebecca Wells, she was a natural connector.
Okay.
She loved connecting with readers, building a community.
Right.
And the book itself, it was just so sticky.
What do you mean?
It really resonated with women, especially those in book clubs.
Oh, interesting.
Those book clubs became like mini mavens.
Spreading the word.
Exactly. And the discussions they had,
Yeah.
they amplified the book's impact, made it even stickier.
So it was the perfect combination of the right people, the right message, and the right environment.
It all came together to create a tipping point.
It's amazing how these seemingly separate things can work together like that.
It really is.
And Gladwell doesn't stop there.
What else does he talk about?
He gets into the importance of group size.
Oh, yeah, that's fascinating.
He talks about Dunbar's number.
Which is
Basically, there's a limit to how many stable relationships we can maintain.
really, there's a number for that.
Apparently so, and it's around 150.
Wow, that's kind of low.
It is, and it makes you think about why some groups work well together.
And others just fall apart.
Exactly.
So keeping groups small is important.
Gladwell uses the example of Gore Associates.
The Gore-Tex people.
Yeah, they intentionally keep their plants small, under 150 employees.
And they're a successful company.
Super successful, known for a great company culture.
Like everyone knows everyone else.
It's like a small town.
So paying attention to group size could be key to building strong communities.
It's definitely something to think about.
Now, ready for a completely different example?
Bring it on.
Gladwell talks about Airwalk, the shoe brand.
I remember those. They were huge in the 90s.
Totally. And they went from this niche skateboarding brand.
To a global phenomenon.
Exactly. A classic tipping point.
Their marketing was really interesting.
It was.
Like, they tapped into that cool skateboarding vibe,
Yeah.
but somehow made it appeal to everyone.
Right. And Gladwell says that was key to their success.
Being able to translate that coolness to a wider audience.
Exactly. It was a big part of it.
So how did they do that?
They had these, like, trend translators.
Trend translator.
Yeah, people who could bridge the gap between the innovators.
Okay.
The ones who set the trends
Right.
and the mainstream market.
The people who follow the trends. So
Exactly.
it's like they took those underground trends, polished them up a bit,
Yeah.
and made them something everyone could get into.
It's like making it cool to be cool, you know.
I like that.
Airwalk had this woman, Dee Dee Gordon,
Okay.
their head of market
She
research.
sounds important.
She was like a maven for cool.
Maven for cool.
Yeah, like she traveled the world,
No way.
observing, listening to what kids were into.
Yeah.
So she could like predict what was going to be hot next.
That's so cool.
And then they had this ad agency, Lambesis.
Okay.
They were amazing at taking those trends
Yeah.
and turning them into a language everyone could understand.
Ah, so their ads were super important.
It's super important.
They had to be clever.
They were, often with this like subtle irony.
I can see that.
They captured that youth spirit without alienating anyone.
It's like they created this world that teenagers wanted to be part of.
Exactly.
One that felt cool, but also achievable, you know?
That's the sweet spot.
And that made the brand Super sticky.
Super sticky.
Okay, ready for something totally different.
Hit me with it.
Gladwell takes us to teen suicide in Micronesia.
Whoa, that's heavy.
It is, but he uses it to talk about social contagion.
Social contagion.
The idea that certain behaviors can spread like a virus.
Okay, I see where this is going.
So this suicide epidemic in Micronesia, it seemingly came out of nowhere.
Really?
Yeah, in the early 60s.
Okay.
Before that, suicide was almost unheard of there.
That's wild.
But then the rates just skyrocketed, especially among young men.
What happened?
It's not totally clear, but there were these patterns.
What do you mean?
Like, the suicides followed a certain ritual,
Oh, wow.
and that points to social contagion.
So the idea of suicide, it became normalized.
Yeah, it spread through peer groups.
It's chilling how powerful social influence can be.
It really is.
And Gladwell connects this to get this teen smoking in the U.S.
Wait, teen suicide and teen smoking.
He sees a link.
What kind of link?
Well, he says they're both driven by this social contagion
Okay.
and influenced by the stickiness factor.
Explain that to me.
Teenagers,
Right.
they're super vulnerable to peer pressure.
Totally.
So they try risky things to fit in, to rebel.
So the first cigarette is a social thing.
Could be.
But why does it become a habit for some?
That's the stickiness factor. For some people, that first nicotine hit,
Yeah.
it's powerful. It creates a craving.
And they want more.
Exactly.
But Gladwell doesn't think we should just tell teens not to smoke.
Why not?
He thinks it could backfire.
Make them more likely to do it.
Yeah, it plays into that rebellious thing.
Makes sense.
So what's the solution?
He talks about unsticking cigarettes, making them less appealing, less addictive.
How do you do that?
He uses the example of bupropion,
It's that.
an antidepressant that also helps people quit smoking.
Really?
It reduces cravings.
Interesting.
So instead of just saying, don't smoke,
Right.
you target the addiction itself.
I get it.
And it also shows the link between smoking and mental health.
Oh, yeah. A lot of smokers struggle with depression.
So addressing that could help people quit.
Wow, we covered so much today.
We did, from connectors and mavens
To the power of context.
and how sticky certain behaviors can be.
It's clear these social epidemics are complex.
They really are.
But Gladwell's ideas give us a new way to understand them.
To see the world differently.
So, as you go about your day,
Yeah.
look for those tipping points.
Those moments when something takes off.
Ask yourself, what's driving it?
Who are the connectors, the mavens, the salesmen?
And how can you use these ideas to make your own ideas stickier?
It's all about paying attention to the little things.
That can have a big impact.
Exactly.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the tipping point.
It was fun.
Until next time, keep exploring and keep those minds open.